I wonder if she's thinking about other guys.
Hey fiends, it's officially spooky season and I'm ready to go on the record, I love possession. What a terrifying concept. Not only is it horrifying to lose control of your own body, but it's also incredibly scary to not be able to trust anyone, even the people you would normally feel safest around. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to involve possession in my D&D games this month, I want fun horror stories, not the kind that show up on Reddit with titles like, I just spent 2 hours watching my DM play my character for me. There are game mechanics for possession, but if you aren't careful, these kinds of encounters can go from fun to miserable before you can say the power of Palor compels you. First, let's talk about how possession actually works in D&D, because the specific mechanics can vary depending on which of the 3 flavors of possession you're dealing with. The vanilla option, definitely the most common, is the monster ability. You'll find it on the Ghost stat block, although Eberron's Quarry also have this feature. If the target fails their initial charisma save, they are immediately incapacitated and have to sit in the backseat while the ghost plays Grand Theft Auto with their limbs. They don't get another save, and the only way the possession ends is if the target drops to 0 hit points, the ghost is driven out with divine magic, or the ghost is like, ooh, I don't like how it feels to be you. I'm gonna go. Must be nice, ghost. Some of us are stuck in here. When dealing with ghostly possession, clerics are going to be your best bet. At 9th level, they can end possession with a Dispel Evil and Good, but they can also turn undead as early as 2nd level, which will drive a ghost out. Thankfully, this doesn't completely break the encounter because they only have so many spell slots and channel divinities, so the ghost can always just possess somebody else. Paladins can theoretically also cast Dispel Evil and Good, but not until 17th level, and I'm pretty sure Tier 4 isn't real. It's just a scary story to keep DMs up at night. Next up is a 6th level necromancy spell called Magic Jar, which is the goofiest name for a very scary spell. It's available to wizards, and it allows the caster to possess another humanoid's body. It works a lot like the ghost's possession ability, with an initial charisma save, and the spell ending when the host body dies, the caster chooses to leave, or the spell's material component, the aforementioned Magic Jar, is destroyed. And finally, there's demonic possession, which is laid out in a very vague way in the monster manual. This section says that when a bound demon is released, it can possess a mortal host. But before you pull out your favorite two-handed problem solver, you can't just knock the target down to 0 hit points and then revive them like you can with a ghost. Instead, killing the host risks their soul being dragged into the abyss along with the demon. Unfortunately, all this is more lore than mechanics. All it says about ending this type of possession is that powerful magic is needed to drive a demonic spirit out of its host. But if you really want to do demonic possession, it's easy enough to copy-paste ghostly or arcane possession onto your chosen demon. The problem isn't that D&D doesn't have rules for possession, it's that following those rules can very easily become unfun. The biggest problem with possession is that when you go by the rules as written, the player loses control over their character and the ghost makes the calls. And since the dungeon master runs the ghost, this means the DM is effectively running the possessed PC while the player sits around watching their friends play without them. Now, this would be perfect if we were going for uncanny reenactment of my high school experience, but it's less helpful when we're going for terrifying supernatural event. Even worse, this leaves the player watching as their character is puppeted around without their input. While the concept of losing your agency and being helpless can be a very effective tool for horror, that doesn't necessarily make it fun to play. In a game of D&D where the dungeon master controls the entire world, the only thing that truly belongs to the player is their own character. That's why it can feel so crappy to lose control over that one thing that's usually theirs. Whoa. I feel really faint all of a sudden. What is wrong with me?
Ginny is gone. Now there is only today's sponsor.
Welcome back to Today's Sponsor, the show where dungeon masters compete to come up with the best encounter ideas inspired by the over 5,000 hand-drawn fantasy battle maps available when you pledge just $5 on Patreon to today's sponsor, Chepeku Maps. Let's meet George and Lisa. Your first map is this icy shipwreck. The ship crashed into an ancient glacial prison, releasing a demon lord of winter. That's a point for George. Next up, this beautiful city. Wyvern-mounted assassins target an ambassador attending an elven masquerade ball. Who's ready for a mini game? I'll show you some of the variations that every Chepeku map has for seasons, weather effects, and more. Players will adapt their encounters to match. Lisa, cultists conduct a ritual to reanimate a long-dead dragon submerged in the swamp. Point for Lisa, the ghost of the dragon fights to defend the cultists using ghostly lair actions. Point for George, the ritual has corrupted the waters which now deal poison damage. And And that's our game for today. Remember, every Cheipeku map is available in print quality with presets for Foundry VTT and even animated. Check out all the content or buy individual maps at cheipeku.com. See you next week when there's a brand new map pack. And cut. That's a wrap. Wait, who won, me or Lisa? Oh, neither. I won. I'm stealing all these ideas for my campaign. Wait, that's not fair. Should have read the contract better. And no, we don't validate parking. Whoa. That was weird. It's like I blacked out for a second. Anyway, let's talk about how to avoid those pitfalls and make possession actually fun to play out at the table. I've got 3 methods that I like to use in my own games. The first and most obvious is to just let the possessed player f up their friends. Honestly, a lot of players will really enjoy this too, some a little too much. Just fill them in on what the ghost is using their body to accomplish and let them loose. You can even do this privately if you want to keep the other players in the dark, by passing them a note or sending them a direct message. Dale Kingsmill suggests giving the player a possession goal, like killing a certain character or destroying an item, and letting them choose how to accomplish it. I also really like her suggestion of allowing the possession to end if the character accomplishes this goal. This solves a lot of problems right off the bat. With this method, the player still gets to act and participate rather than just sitting on the sidelines watching the game unfold without them. Yes, their character must act against their own interests, but at least the player gets to hold the reins. There's also a certain novelty to temporarily stepping into the role of a villain, and even in some ways into the role of DM. I don't know about you, but I definitely have a dark Kermit inside of me that would really enjoy doing just a little PvP as a treat. If you want to make it extra exciting, you can even give the possessed player some sort of special new ability that their possession grants them. If they're being piloted by a ghost, maybe they gain the Withering Touch ability, or all their attacks now deal necrotic damage. If we're talking demonic possession, maybe you give them Hellish Rebuke, or immunity to fire damage or something. But this solution won't work for every table. Maybe your players don't have a dark Kermit inside of them and would pull their punches if told to attack their friends. Or maybe your players don't have a solid enough relationship outside of the game to be able to take it gracefully when a fellow player turns on them. Plus, the higher the stakes, the riskier PvP gets. A possessed character is often actively trying to kill their friends, and if you don't have a 9th level cleric on hand, beating the crap out of your teammate until they start rolling death saves might be the party's only solution. If the possessed character dies, or doesn't just knock out but actually kills a fellow PC, that can very easily create hard feelings. Not between the characters, but between the real-life players. It's hard enough to permanently lose a character, but at least the Dungeon Master is willingly, dare I say, sometimes gleefully, taking on the role of potential fantasy executioner. Players generally haven't signed up to kill their friends' characters, and there's a very good chance that they won't find it fun to be even indirectly responsible for a party member's death. When I'm running a possession encounter for players who don't think a PvP hall pass sounds like fun, I use a method I like to call split screen possession. I got this idea from my friends Monty and Kelly of the Dungeon Dudes, and I think it's pretty brilliant. Here's how it works. When a player character gets possessed, the Dungeon Master takes over running the character and attacking the rest of their party, just like in the rules as written. But on the PC's turn, the player doesn't just sit back and watch. They get their own turn, fighting back against the creature that's possessing them. This separate battle is happening elsewhere, like on the ethereal plane or in the hells. They might even be waging a battle inside their own mind, like when I'm just trying to fall asleep, but some little gremlin crouching in the dark corners of my brain won't stop singing Barbie Girl. So maybe the ghost of an ancient evil paladin possesses a PC, and while that character is taking shots at their party members on the material plane, courtesy of the Dungeon Master, the player is involved in their own little ethereal cage match against Stone Cold Smite Austin. Maybe their friends will free them, or maybe they'll free themselves from the inside. You might even come up with some more complex mechanics that allow the possessed player and their allies to both contribute to ending the possession. It doesn't even have to be combat. The possessed character could be completing a skill challenge, navigating a maze, breaking out of a prison. But however you execute it, the important part is that you allow the player to remain an active part of the scene, even as the DM pilots their character. But Ginny, I hear you saying. That's right, I can hear you, and I wish you'd stop watching my videos on the toilet. Ginny, you're saying, that still feels like it takes away player agency. Isn't there a way to incorporate possession into my games without turning my players against each other? Lucky you, I have one more method to suggest. Just possess a friendly NPC. You already play the NPC, so nobody's character is changing hands, but you still get the narrative benefit of a trusted ally turning on the party. Plus, nobody has to be in on the secret, so you can even have the NPC start acting against the party's interests secretly before anyone even knows that they're possessed. Best of all, since you're not risking a player character, you have a lot more freedom to be brutal with your stakes. Remember how killing someone who's possessed by a demon could condemn their soul to the abyss? That's a perfect opportunity to introduce a whole exorcism plotline. First, they need to learn about the ritual to drive the demon out, maybe by recovering some forbidden scroll from the ruins of an ancient temple, or proving themselves to some sage with this special knowledge. Then they need to collect whatever information or items are needed to complete the ritual, maybe certain divine objects, material components, artifacts of power. The ritual itself could be a skill challenge or a puzzle, and then finally, if the ritual works, they have to defeat the demon that they just drove out of the NPC. This whole thing could be an entire quest arc. Plus, since the possession isn't forcing any of your players into the backseat during gameplay, you have an opportunity to go full exorcist and have someone suffer the long-term effects of possession. Trust me, you can go way harder with a possessed NPC than you can with a possessed player. They won't eat or drink or sleep. They have to be restrained to keep from harming themselves and others. You can describe dark, hollow eyes, cracked lips, a voice hoarse from screaming. Sorry, did I sound too excited there? Calm down, Dark Kermit. I'm gonna start to think I'm possessed. People often say that D&D isn't built for horror, and that's completely fair. It's a heroic fantasy game, not a horror game. But that doesn't mean that you can't pull off a scary session or two if you put in a little effort. If you're planning a spooky game night this October, make sure that you watch this video next. In it, I talk through 3 tips for how to do horror in D&D, plus how to avoid 2 mistakes that will undermine your own efforts to make your game scary. I'll see you next week. I'm gonna go take a crab walk. A regular walk, obviously.